thought came to my mind when I was watching South Park the other day. So in the South Park, which is a cartoon, Butters, one of their characters, is a perfect vessel for philosophy, specifically about one episode where he falls in love and where he represents uh, the event, the availability that I was talking about in one of my podcasts when it comes to love. In one of the episodes called Raisins, Butters gets dumped. And long story short, because I feel like going into details would be hard, but he falls in love for, he gives his heart to this girl who is definitely not going to love him back. He doesn't understand that that person is a professional and that person is not available for him. And which seems like an extreme example, but actually it's something that happens to a lot of us. I mean, look at how many people you have around you and the people you want to be friends with, the people you want to be in love with. And I'm sure it happened that a lot of people didn't reciprocate to that, to your level of friendship, to your level of love and commitment. And even if your friends or acquaintance or whatever you want to call it, colleagues, let's say, they're perhaps not befriending you or loving you the way you want them. And I think it's an interesting idea that actually Butters explores. And in this episode, you have a group, let's say they're called Goth, and they're kind of a nihilistic group. They believe that life is just pain and that pain is inevitable but also not productive, and that you should reject society, that you should reject even the idea of life, because what's the point of living if it is to suffer? And Burrs explain to them that he's not going to join them, which surprises the character, because the other characters, they're thinking, wait, you've been hurt as much as us, you've been hurt even more, and you're miserable and you're sad, you should be with us. And he's saying why he's happy to be miserable. He says, I'm happy that I can feel this bad because it makes me feel alive. It makes me feel human. And the only way I could feel sad now is because I know that I felt something really good before. And this is the recursive nature of the risk. Butters is arguing that the uncertainty, the risk, the pain, when it comes to love or when it comes to meeting someone or even actually any expectation, whether it is about your job or your friends, etc., it's not a bug in the system. It's not a problem. It's not a bump on the road of love or anything else. It's the evidence of their value. And to be sure, for example, if you talk about love in that case, which I think is very interesting to talk about love, he says that to be sure about someone is to try and to avoid the beautiful sadness. But if you only go out with people you're 100% sure, then it won't hurt you, because you're engaging in what Badiou calls, and what I've talked in my previous video before, the risk-free love. And Burrs accepts the pain because he understands that it's a price of admission. He understands that he can be heartbroken, that his expectations will not be met, perhaps, and that perhaps he's going to hate himself for making the wrong decision, for not having the thought about that or things like that. But it's not what he actually knows. He knows that he's been thinking about this potential loss, this potential deceitful moment. He's saying it's the price of admission for having experienced the two scene that Badiou talks about, or the mystery that Marcel talks about. He argues that if he has to be the most available character, it's because he's constantly, and actually as a character, he's constantly at the disposals of others, often to his own detriment, unfortunately. For example, when it comes to friend, he really wants to befriend the other kids from his school. So he's willing to do anything to please them, and that's how people abuse him. But it's not because he's being abused or tricked that he's wrong. He's actually right. But the people who trick you or who are abusing that trust, they're the ones who are morally wrong, and even on a deeper level, perhaps in the eyes of God or whatever it is that you believe in, they probably will be judged for that, because they took you for a fool, but they took your foolishness for kindness, which is some of the quotes from the Bible that appear, give the other cheek. It doesn't mean to be kind blindly, but it's to know that you have to forgive to move on. And sometimes it's not even about forgiving others. You don't necessarily hate your past friends or your past lovers or your past husbands, wives who, let's say, abused you, or even your parents. You don't necessarily hate them, but perhaps you hate yourself, or you hate the image of yourself that you've painted, even subconsciously. And oftentimes we're not really available for that idea. We're not really ready for that conversation. And Marcel argues that love is to be vulnerable. And Burris is very vulnerable. Even though he has been burned 1,000 times, he approaches every new encounter with openness, with kindness, and he's the image of Christ in many ways. And why? Because it actually, that's one of the questions you could ask yourself. But why does he keep doing it? He doesn't learn. He knows that if he keeps doing that, he's going to suffer. That's the bet he's going to take. That's the will to live that he's doing, that he's having, is to know that if he closes himself to avoid being unsure, to avoid being hurt, then he ceases to exist. He ceases to be, because it's not possible. You're basically an outcast. You cannot find love if you're wearing an emotional armor. And Burris shows that the risk isn't something you do once at the start. It's a state of being where you decide that the possibility of the event is worth the certainty of the heartbreak. And it's, I think, an interesting idea. It doesn't mean that you have to be sure at some point that you have to lower your guard. Actually, Butter says that, in his views, and actually according to the philosophers, they're saying that you should never have a guard, because if you do, you're not willing to take the risk and you're not willing to grow. And one of our character that I think personified that very well, in a different way and perhaps in a less serious way, because it's from The Simpsons, but Butters represents, as I said, the start of the risk, right? But Marge represents both the start of the risk and the maintenance of the risk. So Marge is the spouse of Homer Simpson. Perhaps you're aware of that. And Marge, in countless of episodes, she's unsure about Homer, whether it is at the beginning the relationship or even during marriage. Well, who wouldn't? He's lazy, he's messy, he's impulsive, and he's not very intelligent, let's be honest. But if Marge looked at Homer through the eyes of a market exchange, she could have traded him for a better model. She's attractive, she's intelligent, even if they often try to portray her as I would say a lower IQ than, for example, her daughter, Lisa. She's a very measured and intelligent woman, and you can see that through the series. And the construction of truth is from the random moment where she met Homer at prom, and that through decades of will, she has turned it into a necessity. So she's not sure about him. In many episodes, she doubts. She's terrified of her choices, and actually his choices as well. But she's sure about the marriage. She has moved from being sure about the object, as in Homer, to being sure about the project, their love. And a lot of people, and especially very controllable people, people who have suffered, not necessarily evil people, but people who have suffered a lot from traumas, they only experience love when they can control the outcome, because the ego wants certainty, and that's something that is very human. And you want the other person to be an object that we can manipulate. And it sounds bad, but it's not a manipulation in I would say, in a psychological deep level, but it's more like you can shape that person to be who you think they are, like an idol or an ideal that you want, and you're focusing only on the outcome. This is why a lot of people are fundamentally lonely. And nowadays you see it with so many women and so many men who are lonely. Besides the reason that men and women cannot understand each other, that we have dating apps at every corner, etc., etc. There's a lot of problems for sure. But one of the things is that we refuse the risk of the other. And whenever you're unsure about a relationship, you need to allow yourself to be unsure, because the only people who experiences the metaphysical leap are the people who are willing to be unsure. So if you were to be sure, you can be like Cartman or Mo or other characters who are lonely, because they're calculating, they're guarded, and they're ultimately alone. If you accept being unsure, then you're going to be like Butters. You're going to be like vulnerable, potentially heartbroken, but you're going to be alive. And also, you're going to be potentially fulfilled. And that's the thing, you're willing to take a bet. And it is the same thing as going to the gym or going to church. You don't know if it's going to come out, let's say, how you want. You don't shape your physique by going to the gym once. You build it through years and years of training. And if you're a natural bodybuilder or a person who goes to the gym regularly, I'm sure you know that you see how difficult it is to grow muscle, whether it is you're a man or a woman. It takes years and years and years. Yet you don't focus on that outcome unless you're taking steroids and other enhanced drugs. But if you're focusing on the outcome, then you're going to be deceived every time, because you're going to be seeing people happier than you, people fitter than you, people more muscular, with lifting more weight, with more strength, etc., etc. But if you're able to be vulnerable, to believe that it's all going to pay out in the end and just need to be focused, then you will put in the work. You will show up at the gym every week, you will train, and you will do what's necessary, and then the outcome will eventually come. And it's the same like going to church. Like, a lot of people don't know if it's going to pay out, but you still go every Sunday. You still pray, you still have thoughts, or if you're Muslim, you still do Ramadan, you still do all these things, or if you're Jewish, you still do Shabbat. You don't know if it's going to work out, but you're willing to take the bet that it might be. And love is the decision to treat a random accident, the meeting, as if it was destiny. Burst isn't a fool for being hurt. He's actually the smartest of all, the most wise of all, because he realized that being hurt is just the shadow cast of the light of the encounter. And to be sure is to turn the light off so you don't have to see the shadow. And the adventure requires us to be okay with the beautiful sadness, with the tenacious, adventurous journey that is love to yourself, that is love to your friends, to your significant other, or to the potential significant other, and whether it is to the gym, to church, or even within yourself, or with a relationship that you may consider, you have to accept to be vulnerable, because it helps to bridge the gap between the person you are today and the person you want to be, the outcome.